Somber Teacup Chronicles presents Arcane Academia.
Hello students, I'm sorry about my last panic outburst in class. I was not able to find most of my stationery, but I was able to find my wax and some of my papers. I have addressed my concerns with the university, and they are doing a full-scale investigation into the matter. As you know, TAR, the Tactical Anomaly Response Unit, is in a joint venture with Arcane Academy to research these abnormalities. However, the university has informed me that their investigation has been stopped where TAR's duties typically begin. This is rather unfortunate because they have blocked any progress to find the culprit. I have my lab assistant, Tim, who's currently looking into the events that occurred into the disappearance of some of my items in my lab, along with tracking down Mr. Thomas, who has mysteriously disappeared. I need to talk to him about the seal on the envelope because something feels very off. The seal in itself is very special to the VonCraft family name. There's not many stamps left. The rupture and the events following has seen to that. The recent case studies about an interesting fish that lives in several small ponds and lakes in Cross Lake, Minnesota. The rupture has caused some strange abnormalities to occur in a lot of the lakes. Personally, I do not like boats, so I was a little disturbed to learn that some of the lakes in the area were discovered to contain high concentration of acids that would melt the hulls of boats used by TAR when we were first investigating. It has not been a very easy time for them, and it took a lot of time for them to receive a new specimen from the lake to study. One of our researchers, Mr. Slivits, has been more than happy to give me his research to share with the class. His notes read as follows. Date, April 1st, 2020. It was such a pain for me to pack up my things on such short notice to help TAR with their little experiments. I keep telling them that the hulls of the boats are not strong enough to sail through the lake. They stubbornly denied my advice to wait for the appropriate shielding. Some level 1 members thought that their scout boats would be good enough to sail over the pond. They made it a quarter of a mile before their boats began to disintegrate. They began to shout and scream and began to sink into the lake. We fortunately were able to get an emergency team out there to pick these poor idiots that had a second-degree burns over most of their body. We were able to treat them and send them away before things got worse. I was not impressed by TAR and their operations at this point. Despite their appearance and reputation, the team that they sent out were not very well trained or equipped for this kind of expedition. I messaged some of my fellow colleagues to send me some information about what we would be studying on this site to give me a good idea of what is going on. They sent me a bunch of images of creatures on the surface of the water. I received many eyewitness reports of some strange living things in the lake that were not native. There was a short report of 2 men going fishing in the lake during one of the first waves of the rupture. In short, the report that they gave was that the lake began to turn a very strange purple color, and the fish began to die all around the lake. They floated above the surface before beginning to dissolve. And their fishing wire, for some reason, was unaffected initially, and they felt something pulling on their hook. When they began to realize what was going on, the fishing line snapped. They could see something close to the surface of the dark purple water. It was a very large and fish-like shape. It's all pale white something sticking out of the water. The shadow looked to be about 2 feet long. After the first report, more began to flood in. That's what drew the university's attention here, and there were several other reports of mysterious shapes in the water. One thing that was strange is that all the native wildlife in the area would completely avoid the lake. It was almost as if they knew intuitively that the lake was incredibly dangerous, as seen by the dissolving fish. It took some time to walk around the area of the lake to see if any bones or remains of the creatures of the new environment would wash up on shore. When I came back, I found something a tad strange. I'm not sure what it was, but it looked like a black pearl. I took the proper precaution and used forceps to pick out the strange-looking pearl, and I placed it in a plastic bag. I submitted the pearl to the research department team the next day. We were finally able to venture out on the lake on our 3rd day of quarantine and preparation. We had made sure to prevent any outsiders from accidentally stumbling into the area. TAR has not had a best track record of safety with its employees. Thankfully, the university has put its foot down and enforced special abnormality safety measures to prevent catastrophe. I waited for the ships to return with the fresh specimen for the test and analysis. I have to say that our 4th day on the site, things began to feel a bit off. I'm not sure how it all started, but it must have been when the ship that we sent out did not return for whatever reason. I talked with TAR and asked for them to scan the surface of the lake and radio out to them on the emergency channel. I began to bite my nails nervously. I asked around, and apparently there was a strange fog that morning when the boat set out. People all over the camp talked about seeing strange shadows in the fog as the crew set out that day. We decided to prevent any further exploration until we sent out drones into the lake above and below the water. There was another incident report I had to fill out that day. It really doesn't get easier as I fill out more and more each month. I have contemplated leaving the university to pursue new and less violent paths. We were fortunate enough to collect some samples in the lake. They were ugly-looking things. They smelled awful and looked like they would taste disgusting. An autopsy of the fish practically confirmed my initial instincts, and I almost threw up after cutting open the fish. It released a very nasty smell. I checked what I could only assume was the fish's digestive tract. It was filled with a thick substance that we tested. Turns out that the fish was consuming large amounts of calcium. This sounds simple on the surface except for one thing. The fish had no mouth. The eyes were a milky white, and the fish still in the tank would make this sound that reminded me of bones clanking together. Prolonged isolation of one of the test subjects shows that the bone plating of the fish is not self-made and is more of a defense. The defense doubles as a food source as well. The specimen that we separated and began to starve started feeding on its own bony armor to survive. Eventually, we were able to see its true form. The fish had sickly green and yellow scales. Its body was very thin and bony. Its gills would leak this strange green fluid out as it breathed. I dissected a couple more and found similar body structures as the initial. The only thing that was different among the fish was the bones covering its body. The bones would be covering their body from head to tail. Their belly was the least covered. I came to the conclusion that they were some strange bottom feeder on their origin world. They must have picked up some bones from the bottom of their environment and attached them to their body. Using some sort of bioadhesion, they would fuse it to their skin. There was something that I found very troubling one night as I was leaving the lab alone. As I was leaving, I cleaned up all the instruments and turned around to lock up. I took one more glance at the fish tank and noticed something. I'm not sure what it was, but I saw something familiar about the bones on one of the fish. They looked like finger bones. They were fused to its skin. I saw a small glimmer of a gold ring on one of its fingers. My stomach churned and I went back to the fish tank. They were all looking at me with their milky white eyes. I pulled out the fish with the ring on its body. I did not know if it was responsible for the death of the owner of the ring, but I just watched as it flopped on the floor. I watched as it flopped on the floor with its white eyes looking directly at me. And then I grabbed a very sharp harpoon, and I looked down at the fish and pierced it through its eye, killing it instantly. I felt nothing as I killed the fish. I crushed its bone armor and retrieved the ring. The next morning I asked around if the ring belonged to any one of the TAR members that had been on the boat the previous day that had disappeared. The ring did not belong to any of the members in TAR and was not recognized as any ring that I'd ever seen. It had no clear markings to who the owner might have been. The ring was submitted as evidence and would be further examined. I'm submitting this case file with the symbols that I saw on the ring. The case file will go to Professor VonCraft. If anyone can figure out this weird shit, it's him. Case file ends here. I was thankful for Mr. Slivits for bringing me this particular case file. I was a little disturbed when I learned that the bonefish were using human remains to act as armor. But something else troubled me a little bit more. The ring. I have sketches of the symbol that Mr. Slivits has provided to me in my personal journal. He was right. I do recognize the symbols on the ring, although this does complicate things and creates more questions. The symbols belong to the Ukar. The Ukar, as many of you know, is a strange land we know almost nothing about. However, we do know that they were extremely advanced despite their Gothic and often medieval architecture and art. They were able to advance very fast by using some sort of energy that was plentiful and inexhaustible in their world. I often wonder if we will ever rise to such accomplishments as the Ukar, or fall like their long-dead civilization. I know this is a shorter lecture than the other ones that you are accustomed to, but I have some business that Class is dismissed. Please look at the reading I assigned for you this week. It is a short piece about the evolution of myths and the real-world accounts of those monsters.